everybody. I'm Vivien Kent, and I'm a wildlife biologist and co-founder of the North East Otter Network. And I'm absolutely delighted to say that today I'm going to be talking to Bob Wilkin, who has got the most incredible history of working with wildlife, both in the North East and elsewhere in the country. Bob, do you want to just introduce yourself and tell us about how you started getting interested in wildlife and natural history?
Well, really, I've been very fortunate because over the past 80 years, my interest in natural history has never been diminished. And it started from my first school years. I was influenced by mainly two of my teachers. One was a Mr. Charles Pearson, who was my horticultural master. Now, he was a hunting and shooting man. It would probably be frowned upon today, but he was a very good naturalist. And he used to spend his weekends out in the Solway, lying on the mud flats, waiting for the wildfowl to come in. And on a Monday morning, after assembly, we'd parade round the quadrangle, and there would be laid out the bag of the weekend, so we'd see the geese, the ducks, etc., that he'd acquired over the weekend.
Shot.
But as I say, he was a very good naturalist, and he first introduced me to badgers by pointing out the badger latrine in the grounds of the school. Another teacher was a Miss Foster, and she is our science mistress, and she read Talk of the Otter for us over a number of weeks, and I could barely wait for the week to commence to follow the next chapter. And of course, Talk of the Otter is by Henry Williamson, and I was very fortunate in many years later to meet Henry Williamson and spend a lot of time in Talker country, the land of the two rivers. So that I had a very good introduction to natural history. And I suppose one of the sense of pride I had that some 40 years later, while giving lectures here at the Hancock Museum, both my teachers attended some of these lectures. And I felt I was giving something back to them for the patience that they'd given me when I was in the school years.
That's lovely. And was your school in Newcastle then?
No, it was Guidepost Secondary School.
Which is where?
It's just a little bit up from the River Ones back there.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
And of course, I left school at 15.
And what did you go and do? Did you continue your interest in wildlife straight out of school, or was it something you came back to?
Well, I went into forestry and estate work, and there I spent a good quarter of my life there. And then I did 3 years in arboriculture, and finally I took up a post as resident warden in Jesmond Dean. And it was with some trepidation that I took this job, because being used to the countryside and suddenly find myself right in the centre of the city, it's a very strict learning curve. But I didn't worry, because I found that many people in the city themselves are interested in wildlife. And it was amazing what Jesmond Dean actually produced over the years.
So when was that you started in Jesmond Dean? What year was that about?
That was about 1976.
Okay, so what were you seeing in Jesmond Dean in those days?
Well, of course, then the water vole was very common, and if I was doing natural history walk, it was so easy to point out the voles swimming across the river. We had the kingfisher, we had dippers, and occasionally we have roe deer would come down from Gus's Park. So for a city park, it had a real wealth of wildlife.
Yeah. And you've had a long association with the Ousburn, haven't you? Because you live on the Ousburn.
That's right, yes. Besides living in Jesmond Dean, my house in Gosforth was on the edge of the Ousburn, and I had badgers, foxes, roe deer, even otters coming in. Otters were coming into my garden pond. And it was a terrific feeling to have them right on your doorstep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So obviously, in the 1970s, otters were not as common as they had been previously. Was that did you notice the decline as you were working and living on the Newsburn?
Yes, the decline was enormous. I took on one of the early surveys from the Tees to the Tweed. A good example was, I might go up into the wilds of Crocodile, etc., spend a full day and only find 2 new otter sprinkling sites.
Goodness.
And yet, in 2000, in about 4 hours on the Newsburn, I identified 20 odd sprinkling sites. So you see the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you started using trail cameras as well, didn't you?
That's right, yes.
So what got you into using the cameras?
Well, it was the Wildlife Trust first introduced them, and I had the loan of some cameras, which we set up in my garden at Gosforth, and of course we had the badgers, and then we had foxes coming in, but of course the highlight was the otters, and the very fact that otters were coming onto my land, my garden, was a terrific experience.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And how quickly did you see the otters starting to come back once the recovery started?
The recovery was terrific. I mean, say the sightings of otters multiplied, and it wasn't just naturalists that were seen; it was ordinary people going about their business. Golfers playing on the golf course, the otter was swimming past them. And sightings in places where we didn't expect to see them, suddenly turning up.
Yeah, it has been an incredibly wonderful success story, hasn't it, the return of the otter?
Oh, it's been marvellous. When I look back to the actual decline, well, first of all, we had the birds of prey in the 1950s. But that was something we could see. I mean, birds of prey were literally dropping out of the sky. But it was quite different with the otters, because an otter that's unhealthy, is suffering from illness, you don't see it. It'll go into the hold, it'll die in the hold, and we never knew there was anything wrong. So it took a number of years before we started to notice the demise of the otter.
Yeah. But then that recovery, as you say, happened slowly at first.
That's right.
And then speeded up, so it has been wonderful. So have you been able to identify any otters individually that have come into your garden? Have you been able to follow their progress?
Well, on instances they have come in, it's been very, very brief.
Yeah.
So there's no sort of identification of the animals. But of course, the very fact that they're coming into my garden pond was enough for me.
And did you see females with cubs? Did you get cubs as well?
I've seen females with cubs in different other sites. Yes.
Yeah, lovely, lovely. So do you keep records of those sightings that you have? Well, sort of throughout your life, but particularly the ones that come in, that you've seen from your garden.
Well, I do keep records, but unfortunately these are road casualties. And believe it or not, since the year 2000, I've recorded at least 27 deaths of otters in and around Newcastle. And only 3 of those were natural causes. All of them being where the otters have left a stream or a river to cross a road and unfortunately been hit by vehicles.
And what about the animals that you see from your garden, in your garden on the trail cameras? Do you keep records of those? Have you seen sort of fluctuations or patterns of behaviour from those sightings?
Well, I've noticed that normally April is when you get the presence of the otter, and it's in then is when between March and April the frogs are starting to spawn in the ponds, and this is what is attracting the otters.
What about other wildlife as well? Have you seen any patterns or interesting behaviours from other wildlife that you get, foxes and badgers?
Well, during COVID, of course, it was amazing what happened in the garden then. Roe deer were coming in quite regularly then. And several other gardens in the village itself. I live in Garden Village, and several other gardens were having visitations by the roe deer. It was simply because people weren't moving around. There was less vehicles on the road, and the roe deer were exploring the limit of the territory. Yes.
Lovely. So do you think there are some unique characteristics of wildlife in the northeast or of our landscapes that people are unaware of or don't recognise?
Well, if we look at our landscape, this is interesting because although we live in a big city, the city itself is intersected by a number of deans. Now, these were quite narrow areas, were once suitable for building. And of course, many of these became private gardens of the industrialists that were developed in Newcastle. And eventually, of course, many of these deans became parks and gardens. And you find that you have an area where animals will still move through. Even though you've got a densely population around you, they will use these narrow wildlife corridors to move around.
And are you in favour of wildlife corridors as something which helps to preserve our wildlife and our habitats?
This is the most important part that we've got, certainly in the city. And a wildlife corridor can be a stream, it could be a river, it could be a hedge, it could be private gardens, it could be public parks. All of these add variety and allow the wildlife to filter through. And a major place, of course, is Gosforth Park Nature Reserve. Here, any surplus animals that we have, birds or mammals, will percolate from the park into other parts of the city.
Yeah, absolutely.
Unfortunately, of course, building is taking place around all the areas of Newcastle. And certainly over the past 40 years, there's been a great deal of infill. It was once grasslands, pasturelands, and we've lost these. But we still have these wildlife corridors.
Yeah, absolutely, and so important, so important. So how do you view the natural world now when you compare it with what you saw around you when you were younger?
Well, if I go back to the 1940s, things were quite different then. As I say, hedgehogs were very, very common. And you virtually go out to any hawthorn hedge in late spring, and you'd find the nests of hedgehogs at the point of departing from hibernation, venturing out in the fields, etc. And if you wanted a pet hedgehog, it was quite easy to acquire one. And likewise, if you go on other creatures like the common lizard. Now, I certainly, as a child, kept lizards as a pet. They weren't common, I know the name is common lizard, but there were a number of sites where they were present. And one of them was a length of hawthorn hedge along the roadside, which I had to pass every day when I went to school. Now, it was a south-facing bank the hedge was on, and of course, when I was going to school or coming back, I looked very carefully on the bankside in the hope of seeing these common lizards.
Yeah, oh, wonderful. And you mentioned earlier on as well seeing water voles commonly in Jesmond Dean. Of course, sadly, that's no longer the case.
When I think back how common water voles were. I had some fishing on the River Line, and I spent a great deal fishing, trout fishing. And it wasn't the fact I was catching fish, it was just to be out in the countryside. And one of the attractions, of course, was to see the water voles crisscrossing the stream, etc. And when I started in Jesmond Dean, water voles were still very, very common. And I could nearly guarantee on a natural history walk, we'd see them swimming across the Ousburn.
Did you used to see them on the Usburn near your house as well?
On occasions, yes, they turned up.
Yeah.
But now we're going back to well into the 1980s.
Yeah.
But after that,
Yeah.
it disappeared. Yes.
Yeah. It is sad, isn't it? When you compare that with the success story of the otter and the sad demise of the water vole, it is a big contrast. So what is it about nature that's kept you so passionate over the years?
I think it's the very fact that as a child, you know, I had a great interest. I started off with frog spawn in a jam jar, and I graduated there, of course, to frogs and toads, into hedgehogs. And finally, of course, I got interested in mammals and spent a great deal of my time studying mammals. And that has been very, very fruitful. I've been very fortunate not only to see wildlife in Britain, but I've travelled in India, I've travelled in the Himalayas, I watched snow leopards in the Himalayas, I watched tigers in India, I've been to Borneo, and I've been to South America, and I had some glorious views of jaguars and other creatures. So, you know, wildlife has always been a great aim in my life.
Yeah, and it always has something new to offer, doesn't it?
It does, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So are you optimistic about the future of wildlife in the North East?
I think things are improving. We're becoming more educated now. You know, in the past, our ranks of naturalists were drawn from landowners, they were drawn from the hunting fraternity, from capekeepers, from river keepers, and anyone else who was interested in nature was looked on as a bit odd. But of course, nowadays, with the use of very good cameras, or binoculars, or smartphones, it's so more easier now to come and encounter wildlife.
Yeah. I mean, I think digital photography has made a huge difference, hasn't it?
Oh, it has.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because everybody's a photographer now, aren't they?
Yes. I mean, you didn't have to worry about your film running out. You know,
or about the settings on the camera.
No, that's right. Yeah.
So it does it all for you. Yeah, it is wonderful. So you do think that there is a promising future for wildlife in the North?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, now education looks at natural history.
Yeah.
Universities are preaching it. And of course, we have to look towards the wild environment because we are facing terrific pressures in the future with climate change. So I think the knowledge we've got now, we're in a much better position to counteract some of the problems we're going to have in the future.
Yeah. Okay, good. That's really reassuring to hear you say that with all your experience. So have you got any advice that you'd give to young people, younger generations, who are concerned about the environment and want to do something to help?
Yes, go out in the countryside, look at your wildlife, join natural history societies, wildlife groups, etc. Immerse yourself in wildlife, and you find it gives you so many rewards.
That's great, that's lovely. So would you like to see more of the natural history being available to the community, to more community groups being out in nature? Is that something that you think would be beneficial?
Oh yes, the more people that we can draw into the interest in wildlife, the more beneficial it would be. Yeah. And it's amazing now that quite the average person has a mild interest in wildlife. And if we can stimulate this, we can improve so much things in the future.
Yeah. So have you got any interesting otter anecdotes or stories, Bob?
Yes, I answered an advert in a wildlife paper to look after an otter while the owners went on holiday.
Was this a European otter or an Asian?
This was a smooth-cut Indian otter.
Oh, right, okay.
And I went down for an interview and got the position. It was arranged that the girl student would take the first week and I'd go down for the second week. Well, during the first week, the girl was a little bit shy of taking the otter out of the pen. The routine was you put a harness on the otter and you took it into the vicarage and it had the full run of the vicarage.
Goodness me.
Now, she left the otter in for 3 days and then decided she would take the otter into the vicarage. She put the harness on it, but unfortunately she didn't put it on tight enough. So when she came out of the pen, the otter escaped. Now she did a very brave thing. She grabbed it by the tail. Now when she came back from hospital, she decided she wouldn't take the otter out again. So
did it bite her badly?
Yes, quite badly. Yes.
Yeah.
So I went back the second week, and the story was related to me. And Snoopy, the smooth-cut Indian otter, had been in its pen all week. It was quite frustrated, and I was a little bit nervous. I went in the pen, I sat down, and Snoopy clambered up onto my knee. And the first thing she did was to bury her canine teeth into the lobe of my ear.
Oh my goodness.
And I thought, I'm going to be disfigured here. But anyway, she relented, and I took it into the vicarage. And we had many, many happy days looking after the otters. And one in particular is forever on my mind. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was in the vicarage, all on my urn. I was in the kitchen. Snoopy was sitting on my lap, and we were watching Ring of Bright Water. And believe it or not, as soon as the otter started to make sounds, Snoopy was up. And you could see that she could recognise certain sounds.
Yeah, oh, that's wonderful.
So, that was a wonderful experience.
Goodness me, what a lovely story that is.
And a few years later, Snoopy died. Snoopy lived to the age of 17.
That's a good age for an otter.
Very good age, yeah. The couple had acquired 2 short-clawed Asian otters, and they in turn produced a cub called Jane. And Jane was actually brought up in the house. She was very, very domesticated. And another very amazing memory I have is going out in the countryside with Jane and a lurcher dog, and both the animals running together across the fields, etc., down to a stream where, of course, Jane was straight into the stream, and she'd spend 3 or 4 hours in the stream. The problem was going back home. She was rather loath to leave the area, so you have to have some pieces of fish. You'd go down, entice her, and then grab her. But again, she was a wonderful animal.
Oh,
And
okay.
the next otter I had to look after was Honey. Now, Honey was a Scottish otter. She'd been found on a caravan site in Scotland, was acquired by the SeaWorld, and passed on to the Schuler family, the couple that lived in North Yorkshire, to care for. And I went down to see Honey. Now, Honey was the Marilyn Monroe of the otter world. She appeared in several short films, and she had a cameo scene in Talk of the Otter.
Oh, really? The film?
Yeah. And she was a wonderful animal. But like Marilyn Monroe, her life was short. She acquired an illness, and she died on the operating theatre.
Oh.
But she was a lovely animal.
Oh, how lovely, how lovely. Now, I think you've got a poem about an otter, haven't you? That you wrote.
This is right. When Otter Hunting finished, I put together some words related to otter hunting, and it was depicted by Landseer's painting, which is in the Lane Art Gallery, the otter hunt.
Yeah.
And it's called the Bible Otter. And we have to imagine the scene over 150 years ago. The otter hounds have met at Bible Hall. They've drawn down the river. They found an otter and they've hunted it for many hours. And finally the otter has succumbed to the huntsman's spear. And it goes something like this. Impaled on the spear, his lifeblood did flow, like the streams of the Tyne, to the hounds waiting below. Gone was the days he spent with his bitch, lost were the nights in fold and in ditch. Forgotten were the cubs he sired, were lost now they tired. From keyless Fairbairn to from keyless Fairbairn to the break of the sea, he lived his life full, he lived his life free. The bay of the hounds echoed beneath Bower Bridge. The death rattle of the horn struck every stone ridge. The cheer of the field reached Newcastle town. The spear was over, the otter was down. It lay for a moment upon the earth though. Then the worry began, and its life was no more. Many years' rain have washed the bloodstains away. Yet the Bible otter is still with us today, in Stillwater Pool where the lilies entwine, by the banks of the falls of the bonny North Tyne. He still journeys on, his quest unfulfilled, for the spirit of the water can never be stilled.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful, Bob. What a fantastic poem. Absolutely wonderful. Well, Bob, it's been absolutely lovely talking to you, and I hope that your incredible history with wildlife has been enjoyed by everybody as well.
Well, I certainly enjoyed relating the things that's happened in the past there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bob. Thank you.